Thank you very much. And may it please this honorable tribunal, my name is Mark Fancher, and I'm the chair of the International Affairs and World Peace section of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, which in the year 2008 will have spent 40 years serving as what many regard as the legal arm of the Black Revolution. And certainly all events connected with the aftermath of Katrina and Rita are of great concern to NCBL. And we are here this afternoon with the hope that we can take care of two specific items of business. The first is something in the nature of a motion. We will request that this tribunal issue an opinion that essentially holds that the United States should be subject to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, and conclude that given events that occurred in the aftermath of this terrible tragedy, that certainly the facts would lend themselves to support an investigation by the prosecutor for the International Criminal Court. For those who don't know, the International Criminal Court was established in 1998, and it was intended specifically to ensure that state actors, even heads of state, are not immune to criminal prosecution. And to put it bluntly, for those who engage in crimes against humanity or who conduct genocide or war crimes, that they can be locked up, simply put. And it's NCBL's belief that had the United States been subject to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, that many of the things which happened in the aftermath of Katrina never would have happened because of the threat, the possibility that they would have been subject to criminal sanction. And so NCBL, in its efforts to determine exactly what happened, did conduct its own investigation and had the opportunity to meet with a number of survivors here in New Orleans. You will hear from one of them shortly. But to give you just a brief idea of the kinds of things that we were told, we had one survivor to explain that she was a witness in the convention center to what many would regard as a gangland-style execution by a National Guard troop. That an individual who was accused of having committed a sexual crime was brought to the National Guard. Two guard troops looked at this individual, took him to their supervisor, and he promptly put a gun to this individual's head and shot him. This same individual described events that were witnessed by her husband, which involved a young woman survivor who was irate, who was upset, who was obviously flustered by everything that had happened in connection with the supposed plans to evacuate. When she began to express her displeasure to National Guard troops, they allegedly took her into a helicopter, flew her to flying altitude, and then threw her overboard to her death. There was another survivor who described evacuation procedures which occurred with regularity, which were race-specific. Specifically, he described situations in the convention center where the SWAT team would enter at prearranged times, would make a beeline for white survivors, and with guns drawn, escort them outside of the convention center to evacuate them to safe quarters. There were other survivors who described, one other survivor who described an incident where he approached a police officer and asked him if the officer knew when buses were coming to evacuate the survivors. This particular police officer looked at him and told him he must be crazy, pulled out a nightstick and began to beat him. He was promptly joined by 5 or 6 other police officers who began to beat him. Then they pepper sprayed him. And this witness alleges that this was done under the watchful eye of the then police chief. He said that the police officers ceased beating him only when he managed to get to his knees and to begin praying. There are accounts of this type which go on and on and on, which describe some of the most egregious crimes, some of the worst crimes against humanity, assuming that they are true. And the issue of whether the United States and other government actors, both at the state and local level, are subject to liability for crimes against humanity is a question which has been of great concern to many as we have begun to discuss this tribunal and preparations for it. There are many who have questioned whether there would be a basis for charging these individuals with crimes against humanity. Specifically, the statute which governs the International Criminal Court, which is called the Rome Statute, or it's a treaty actually, has definitions for this. And the elements of it, of crimes against humanity, are one, that there is a widespread or systematic attack. That's the first element, and this is the one which has caused great concern for many legal specialists, those who specialize in international law, because in order to establish this, you have to demonstrate a course of conduct involving multiple acts against any civilian population pursuant to or in furtherance of a state or organizational policy to commit such attack. Many believe, without necessarily knowing many of the things that we know, after having spoken with survivors, that there was not or could not have been a policy for these National Guard troops and police officers to engage in acts of murder, extermination, and also the crime of genocide, and I'm blanking on the third one. But essentially, what we have been able to determine is that you can look at what happened in the period leading up to and during the period of Katrina, and you can see evidence of what could reasonably be regarded as government policies. One of them in particular, especially in connection with the charge of extermination, has to do with the withholding of food and medicine from a targeted population. And we know that the Bush administration was quite explicit about its determination not to allow the government of Cuba and a number of other governments to provide material aid, medical aid, and assistance to the survivors in New Orleans and elsewhere. We also know that the federal government also actively participated in preventing non-governmental organizations, volunteers, and other people of goodwill from bringing in material aid. It's one thing for the government to establish a policy to prevent this type of aid. It's another thing when the same government on its own refuses to provide the same aid to a population that it's denying aid to. And so this rises to any reasonable, under any reasonable analysis, to the level of being a policy which would certainly be carried out by those who are subordinate to those making these decisions. Certainly this was committed against a civilian population. It's a question of whether it was done with knowledge. Article 30 of the Rome Statute says that knowledge means awareness that a circumstance exists or a consequence will occur in the ordinary course of events. Certainly this is different from a situation where a small battalion of soldiers is in some isolated village and they commit some atrocity that nobody ever knew about, never heard about. This was something that was committed under the glare of the entire world. Everyone was focused on this. The media was focused on it. As to this question as to whether there was a policy, there is a book called City Adrift, which is published by the Center for Public Integrity Investigation, which has a quote, and many people make passing reference to it, but this is the governor of the state of Louisiana. She said, 300 of the Arkansas National Guard have landed in New Orleans. These troops are fresh back from Iraq, well-trained, experienced, battle-tested, and under my orders to restore order in the streets. They have M16s, and they are locked and loaded. These troops know how to shoot and kill, and they are more than willing to do if necessary, and I expect they will. So this is coming from the governor. Any National Guard troop who hears that or knows about it indirectly knows what his or her responsibility is. Soldiers, military personnel, act only in response to orders. They don't make up their own minds to do things. And so when they begin to systematically engage in race-specific evacuations, when they begin to engage in executions, then we begin to understand that this was not something, these were not isolated random acts, but certainly the type of thing that if they are not already apparently crimes against humanity, acts of genocide, certainly should be the subject for an investigation by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. We ask that you do this primarily because of the recalcitrance of the Bush administration. In 1998, when the Rome Statute was enacted and the International Criminal Court was first established, then President Bill Clinton had many concerns, many reservations about whether the International Criminal Court would become the subject of abuse, whether it would be selectively used in order to somehow embarrass the United States or to somehow prosecute individuals within the U.S. administration. But he nevertheless signed on to the Rome Statute with reservations. And so it had not been ratified, but certainly at least there was the potential for it to be at some future point by Congress. When George W. Bush took office, one of his first acts was to direct that the signature of Bill Clinton be removed from the Rome Statute. And not only did he remove the statute, he began to send his underlings to circulate throughout the Southern Hemisphere, going to various different heads of state, asking them to enter into agreements whereby, if for some reason U.S. military personnel or government officials were somehow, because of their presence on their territory, subject to ICC jurisdiction, that they would not cooperate with the International Criminal Court. And many times these demands were acts of blackmail, based on the withholding or the granting of assistance. And so we ask that you join with us, that you issue an opinion that says that the United States should be subject to the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction. And NCBL would hopefully, if you agree with us, use your opinion along with other decisions and opinions by others to begin a campaign in connection with the 2008 presidential race. We do not seek to have any particular candidate elected, but what we do seek is to try and get a commitment from every candidate that if they are elected, that they will re-sign the Rome Statute and set the stage for making the United States subject to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. So I will leave that for you to take under advisement. But in the interim, I would also like to provide the testimony of one of the survivors that we spoke with when we were in New Orleans last summer, who will speak to some of the types of issues that I've outlined, and who will also provide testimony which supports the charges which have been at the heart of what this tribunal is here to determine. So if I might, I would like to call to the stand Mrs. Dale Warren. Okay. Ms. Warren, may I have you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you will give this tribunal will be true? All right. Ms. Warren, if you could, just for the record, if you could state your name. Okay, and if you could speak into the microphone. And if you could also tell us your occupation.
I was an administrative specialist at Housing Authority of New Orleans.
And how long have you lived, or did you live in New Orleans before the hurricane? And you have
50 years.
All right. And
50 years.
Yes, you can actually put your mouth close to the microphone.
Okay.
The judges, what sector we're addressing right now in this testimony?
It actually covers a number of different ones. There are issues concerning evacuation. There are issues concerning the deprivation of life, liberty. It cuts across a number of different of the charges.
All right, let me just ask you one thing, if you know. Will there be a separate presentation on those topics later on, or is your presentation going to cover all those topics, and this will be the only presentation on those topics?
I don't know the full plan involving other prosecutors. I know for this segment of the tribunal, this witness will have testimony which concerns a number of those different topics.
Okay.
And I will have to leave it to the summation to tie in her particular testimony to the specific charges.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Ms. Warren, if I understand correctly, you were stranded in New Orleans at the time that Katrina did hit.
Yes.
Okay, and if you could speak very directly into the microphone. And can you tell me the reason that you were stranded?
My husband had death in the family, and at the last minute, we, decided to evacuate when we saw it was really getting too hard to stick it out.
But you were unable to evacuate?
Yes. At the time, we proceeded to go out, and they advised that they weren't letting anybody cross the twin-span bridge.
And did you hear this, or did you see it?
They turned us around.
And who is they?
The police.
All right. And what did they say at the time?
That the weather was too bad, they weren't letting anybody cross the bridge.
All right. Now, at some point, did you go to projects to take refuge?
Yes. My girlfriend's daughter lived 3 stories up in Iberville, and we decided to stay by our house, the Iberville Public Housing.
And what happened when you were there?
Each day, the day of the storm and 2 days after, we noticed that the water was exceedingly rising. It wasn't going down, so we decided to walk through the parking lot to get on top of the bridge so we could get on higher grounds.
All right. And at some point, you decided that you were going to try and walk
Yes,
to
that
a
was
shelter?
the only way we could. We had to proceed down the bridge because no bus came to pick us up. 2 nights we waggled with her children and my husband and I. Both nights, they kept saying somebody would come and get us, and nobody did.
All right. And once you began to walk, what was your experience then?
You experience the elderly, little children upset from the heat, I guess days without water already, and that was the 3rd day after the storm. You had elderly people, sickly people. I mean, everybody was just in a daze, because of what had happened of rising water.
All right. And as you began to walk, you were walking through the water at some point?
Yes, well, we were lower level till we got on top of the bridge, and that's where mainly everybody was congregating to try to get to the Superdome
All right.
for shelter.
And did you leave the bridge?
Only when I was instructed, when I got to the Superdome, to go to the convention center because they weren't taking anybody else in the Superdome.
And as you walked to the convention center, what happened?
You had various people just laying down on the side of the bridge. You had people that were, I guess they were their days before I, got on the bridge. And, I mean, a lot of people were tired from the heat, hungry, all dirty and stuff from walking through all that water. And then you didn't have water to drink or food or any, sickly people didn't have their medicines or anything like that. It really threw you off because the water came up so fast.
Now, during this period, you had seen rescue workers and others. Is that true?
Yes, they were trying to rescue, but they weren't rescuing anybody on the bridge.
And did they give any reason for that?
Not really. I guess they figured if you were on the bridge, you were safe.
Did you see anybody that they were rescuing?
Well, they told me at the time that the Tribunal public housing was flooded, and they were trying to get some of those some of those people out.
All right. Now, at a certain point, did you reach the convention center?
Yes. Another man that I met, we finally got to the convention center because the Coast Guard told us to go there because they weren't, the National Guard told us to go there because they weren't taking anybody else and to go to the convention center.
Okay. And what conditions did you find at the convention center when you got there?
When I first got there, my first day there, it was, well, some people were upset, but some people were there because they didn't have any water or food or anything. And my second day, the next day, they cut off the lights completely and the air conditioning. So it drove a lot of people out onto the street.
Were you one of those people?
Well, I only walked through the convention center. After I looked around, I didn't want to stay in there.
And what did you see while you did your walkthrough?
A lot of people just lying down, sickly people, children. A couple of people were having seizures. The children crying, the old people laying there, and I was already upset because I had witnessed a woman just sitting in it was a person sitting in a wheelchair with a blanket thrown all over them, and I 3 days later, she was still there.
And was there something about the freezers in the convention center?
Yes, after a while of being there, the group that I had gotten to know while I was there, they said they had food in the freezer. So another lady and I and some of the guys proceeded to go back there. We had lighters and someone had a flashlight, and we went back there looking for food.
All right, and what did you find?
It was mainly ransacked, where I guess other people had heard about it. Like I said, I was outside. And a guy came back out and he told the gentleman that maybe they would want us not go any further because they had bodies in the back.
Bodies in the...
Of dead people.
They were putting dead bodies in the freezer?
In the freezer.
All right. And did you hear who was doing that or why?
I think it was people that, I really don't know if it was people from the convention center or the National Guards. I really don't know.
All right. So you made a decision not to stay in the convention center. Where did you stay?
On the neutral ground.
And what does that mean?
It's a petition in between the different sides of the street with grass on and a little cement area. You just cross over to walk.
Okay, so essentially you were camped out there?
Right.
Right. And there also was there some practice by the National Guard or something having to do with them issuing an order to drop?
Yes. This guy, we were outside, and I guess days of people telling you they're coming for you, and no one came, so he couldn't find his wife and his mother, and he got kind of he got suicidal. I was on the neutral ground, and we heard somebody screaming, so I lift my head, and the woman was telling him whatever his name was, don't do it. And I saw the National Guards coming down, going toward Uptown on Portraits in front of the Convention Center. And he attempted to jump on top of the Jeep so they could kill him. He had already told his sister this is what he was going to do in front of his children because he was tired. He couldn't take it anymore.
Okay. So there were, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was a Jeep with National Guard troops in it.
Yes.
And it was in motion, okay,
Yes.
in front of the convention center. And how many Guard troops were in the Jeep?
4.
4, okay. And were there 2 in the back?
Yes.
And were there 2 in the front?
Yes.
And were they armed?
Yes.
All right. And do you recall what types of weapons the troops in the back had?
Excuse me. The 2 in the back had rifles.
All right.
I can't remember what the 2 in the front had.
All right.
The driver was driving, and I don't remember seeing a rifle from the one in the front on the passenger side where I was laying.
All right. Now, this young man that you said had become distraught, he jumped at the Jeep or on it?
He proceeded to jump on the Jeep, and
before you go on, did he jump on the driver's side or the passenger side?
On the driver's side.
All right.
And but the driver didn't stop or anything, and I didn't see any of the rifles move, so it had to be the passenger in the front next to the driver that shot him, and he just dropped over.
All right. And did the National Guard troops say anything to this young man?
No, all they told us was to stay down, and at that time, some people woke up from the sound, some didn't, and we just stayed down because if we had witnessed, what they were capable of doing, and we didn't want to get crossed in any gunfire.
Now, as the young man jumped on the Jeep, right after he jumped on it or at it, did you hear the Guard troops say anything to him, warning him, asking him to get down, anything of that sort?
No, they didn't say anything.
All right.
They looked at him, I guess, after the sister started hollering to tell him, to stop. And when they looked back, all I heard was a sound, and when he jumped up, he just flipped back over. They shot him in the head.
All right. And did the Jeep stop?
No.
Okay. Did you see any of the Guard troops look back?
No.
All right.
All they hollered was stay down.
All right. Now, you said that, were the Guard troops doing this sort of thing with any regularity? When they yelled drop, what did that mean?
Well, it was an incident that happened the day before, that they were running after somebody and they just decided that they were going to shoot, I guess, and they told everybody drop. And some people didn't, and later on, there was a statement made by one of the guards, when I tell you drop, or else you in the way, you're going to get shot.
All right. Now, the young man that you did see shot, as far as you know, did he have a weapon of any sort?
They claimed that people were saying he had a pair of scissors, but I couldn't see it because this happened like about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and when his body was still there the next day uncovered, I didn't see any weapon of any sort.
So you never personally saw scissors or any other type of weapon? All right. Did you ever, well, you did, but how did you ultimately evacuate from the convention center?
That afternoon, the same day that the guy got killed, they finally arrived.
And who was they?
The National Guards. Well, not the National Guards, but the bus drivers.
All right. And before they arrived, were you watching other people evacuate themselves? And if so, how?
Yes, it had resorted to people paying people to steal cars for them so that they could get away. Because like I said, that was about the 4th day that we were there, and they just kept telling people they were coming that day and nobody came to rescue us.
All right. So there were people who were stealing cars in order to get out of that
Yes,
situation?
paying people, yeah, because there's some guys, I guess, knew how to do this, and they had a car dealership that wasn't for, or any car that was in good condition. One lady, she was a preacher, and she paid somebody to get her and her family because her sister-in-law was having seizures from no water, heat, and hunger.
Okay. So if the governor had given instructions to shoot looters, quote unquote, do you think that people who were stealing those cars might have been subject to being shot?
They would have been shot.
Right. And what is that based on? Based on what you saw?
The treatment overall, the way they were treating people and talking to people.
Right. Were they keeping families together during this evacuation?
In the beginning, yes, but a lot of people that ended up at the shelter, even in Arkansas where I was, stated that they were separated from their families.
All right. And what happened to you ultimately? Where did you end up?
Redfield, Arkansas.
And,
They had guns drawn on us when the bus pulled up.
and who was they?
The National Guard
All right. And were they
and the
saying?
police of Redfield, Arkansas.
How about the people of Redfield, Arkansas? Were they happy to see you?
I really, in the beginning, they acted as though they were.
All right. All right. I have nothing further.
Questions? Ms. Ayatoro?
First of all, you read a quote from a
Can you hear you
book.
speaking to the mic, please?
You read a quote from a book, quoting the governor.
Yes.
Can you put that page with the cover page of the book in evidence?
I will. I will be happy to do that.
So that'll be in Exhibit 1. And then, am I clear that your testimony is that you saw the man shot on the 4th day or the 3rd day after?
The 4th.
On the 4th day after Hurricane Katrina hit?
That was my 4th day at the convention center.
Okay, when, do you know about what day that was?
I would
After
say
Katrina?
that maybe that Thursday or Friday
Okay,
after
Thursday.
Katrina.
Mhm. I have no further questions.
Anybody
Thank you.
else? Questions? In the front? I think I have one. One moment.
Yes.
No, actually, I think no more questions.
All right. Thank you very much. Your Honors, it was suggested to me that with respect to the item of evidence that I'd like to introduce, I'd like to have it marked. I don't have a copy at this point, but I can provide it later. But for the record, the quote came from, the title of the book is City Adrift, New Orleans Before and After Katrina. It's a compilation of essays by different authors. But this particular quote that was referenced during the presentation is on page 96. The publisher of the book is the Louisiana State University Press, copyright 2007.
Will you be able to get a copy of that to us today, sir?
I understand that someone can make a copy and have
Thank
that
you.
available.
And we should categorize that as Exhibit 1, forced dispersal.
This is forced dispersal?
That's at least the category. If we really look at a number of the testimonies, they've covered a number of different topics. And as Mark had indicated, when we do the closing argument, we'll tie all of that and see how it's woven, and it's very difficult to separate in a clean category, so to speak. At this point, we're going to move into the category entitled Labor, and Prosecutor Joan Gibbs is going to present in that area.
Thank you. May it please the Court. As the panel is probably aware, in the aftermath of Katrina, there was a displacement of the working class and workers and the poor in New Orleans, and in an effort to get more employees and exploit, there was a great deal of attention focused on bringing migrant workers. The globalization has produced, as we all are aware, a movement of workers from around the world seeking jobs, and so that's what this segment is going to deal with. We're going to begin first with Dennis, who's from Honduras. I want to begin by swearing in the witness. So do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Sí.
Okay. When did you come to New Orleans?
Hace año y medio.
A year and a half ago.
Okay.
Excuse me, could we get the witness's name spelled first, please?
It's Dennis. I'm not going to say his last name. I'm just going to introduce him as Dennis because of his...
Okay.
Did you come for a job?
Sí.
Yes.
Okay. How much were you paid in your position when you first came?
$200 al día.
$200 a day.
And what did this position entail?
De limpieza y de demoler las casas.
Demolition and just cleaning.
Did there ever come a time when you were not paid what you were promised?
Sí.
Yes.
Could you describe briefly, if you will, those incidents in which you were not paid?
La primera ocasión llegué a una esquina a buscar trabajo y llegó una persona
On the first occasion when I was looking for a job, I went to a corner. A person told me
y me dijo que trabajara por un tiempo con él.
and asked me to work for a certain time with him.
La primera semana que trabajé con él me pagó 2 días.
The first time I worked with him, he paid me 2 days.
La siguiente semana un día.
The next week, 1 day.
La otra semana otro día y la siguiente semana no me pagó.
The next week of work, he paid me 1 day, and then the next week he didn't pay me.
Y ya cuando al final me dijo que no me iba a pagar y que si yo peleaba que me iba a echar la policía.
And then finally, when I said, well, why aren't you paying me? He said, well, I'm not going to pay you anymore, and if you protest, I'm going to put the police on you.
Pues yo no hice nada, me dio miedo.
And I didn't do anything, I was scared.
Esa es una nada más, y la segunda vez pues me llevaban a trabajar, me dejaban tirado.
The first time. The second time, they took me to work, they just left me abandoned.
Y al final del día pues no me pagaban.
And then at the end of the day of work, they didn't pay me.
Es más o menos lo que me ha pasado.
And that's pretty much what's happened.
Were you ever injured in any of these positions?
Sí.
Yes?
Could you describe how you were injured?
Estaban en la esquina del Home Depot de Grena esperando trabajo
I was on the corner of Home Depot and Grena, looking for work.
y llegó pues, el empleador y me dijo que ocupaba 2 personas para coquear unas ventanas.
An employer came by and said he needed 2 workers to put in windows.
Y cuando fuimos al trabajo, pues no fuimos a coquear, sino que nos dijo que necesitaba que jaláramos unas cosas de la casa de él a la casa donde se iba a trabajar.
And when we went to supposedly do the windows, he said, no, that's not what we needed. He needed us to move stuff from one house where he was to another.
Pero cuando la llevábamos ya con lavadoras, secadoras y llena de madera,
When we were taking washing machines, dryers, a lot of wood,
el señor dijo que acuñáramos la traila para dejarla ahí.
he said we should go take it to the trailer and leave it there.
Cuando lo estábamos acuñando, el jack no servía, se resbaló y me cayó sobre mi mano y casi me la parte en dos.
And when this happened, there was a large utility, something fell on me and on my hand, and almost broke it.
Y pueden notar mi mano como está. Está ahí, este dedo lo tengo tieso y todavía estos 4 no los he recuperado bien.
And you can see my hand, one of the fingers is still, I can't bend it, and I have not really recovered full use of my hand.
Tengo más de 5 meses de no trabajar ningún día.
And I have more than 5 months here without being able to work a single day.
Okay. Did you receive, did your employer assist you in paying for your health care?
No,
No.
Did your employer come to visit you while you were hospitalized?
no,
How long were you hospitalized?
5 días.
5 days.
Okay. Have you seen this employer since that time?
No,
No.
Okay. Are you currently working or able to work?
no.
Okay. Since coming to New Orleans, have you had any encounters with the New Orleans police?
Sí, me han arrestado por,
Yeah.
por estar buscando trabajo.
I've been arrested for looking for work.
Could you describe the circumstances under which you were arrested?
Estaba como siempre en el Home Depot de Grena porque ahí es donde yo me paraba a buscar trabajo.
I was there on the corner of Home Depot and Grena. That's where I always go to look for work.
Y estábamos parados en la banqueta muy cerca del Home Depot
I was on the sidewalk right close to Home Depot.
cuando llegaron 5 patrullas y nos sacaron armas y nos apuntaron y dijeron que nadie se moviera.
5 patrol cars came, took out their guns, pointed at us and said, don't move.
Nos arrestaron y nos llevaron al precinto,
They arrested us and took us to the precinct,
incluyendo a 2 organizadores.
including 2 organizers.
Pero no nos dijeron que por qué nos arrestaban,
But they didn't tell us why we were arrested.
sino que ya estábamos cuando en el precinto dijeron que estábamos en propiedad privada y por andar en vagabundería.
And when we were finally in the precinct, they said it's because we were on private property and because we were vagabonds.
Pues fue algo que me dio mucho temor a mí porque unos días antes un policía me había dicho que me parara, me había registrado y me había robado $200.
And I was very scared because just a few days earlier, a police stopped me, was going to arrest me, and took $200, stole $200 from me.
Y todo nos dio mucho temor porque el problema de la policía es que trabaja junto con migración y cuando te ven cara de latino pues llaman a migración
And
para...
the reason we're so scared is because the police works closely hand in hand with ICE, the immigration, and when you look like a Latino, you're easily prone to be arrested.
Pero gracias a Dios todos corrimos con suerte y la organización y los sobrevivientes de Katrina, que son afroamericanos, ellos pusieron la plata para pagar la fianza y sacarla.
But thank God, in the aftermath of Katrina and the work and the organizing that's being done, African American organizations came forward and paid the bail.
Porque yo he visto... Porque yo he visto cómo han arrestado la policía personas que son latinos, que andan manejando sin licencia y ellos mismos llaman a migración para que migración los deporte a su país.
Because I've seen how there are Latinos driving without licenses and they're immediately arrested, deported.
Let me ask you, did you report the theft of your $200 to anyone?
No, porque yo no sabía qué hacer.
No, because I didn't know what to do.
Thank you. Does this panel have any questions, because we have a second witness? Are there any questions?
Une question.
No.
Pourquoi, d'après vous, ça ne servait à rien de déposer plainte après ce vol et cette violence policière?
Why the difficulty in going to the police to make this denunciation?
El problema es que cuando la policía llega, te cuestiona tu estatus migratorio y entonces a nosotros nos da miedo.
It's because when the police arrest you, they'll ask you about your immigration status, and that's why we're scared.
Y si se puede notar, en los últimos días han sucedido muchos homicidios, robos hacia los latinos y hacia otras personas, pero por miedo no lo denuncian.
If you look at just what's been happening in the community, there have been a lot in recent days of homicides, of violence, and we are scared, all of us, and we just are not able to go and to report these.
Y queremos ver a los policías como nuestros amigos, no como nuestros enemigos.
We want to see the police as our friends and not as our enemies.
Y si siguen haciendo esto, ningún latino va a reportar pues los daños y perjuicios que se les hace.
But if this keeps going on, no Latino is going to be reporting anything of the damages that they're subjected to.
Any further questions?
Merci.
¿Qué razones te viste obligado a salir de Honduras y venir a Nueva Orleans, a Estados Unidos?
Por la misma pobreza. La intención mía es ayudar a mi familia.
The question was, for what reasons did you feel compelled? Were you forced to leave your country? The answer is for those very same reasons. I had to go help to raise money for my family.
Es que hay muchos más hondureños y centroamericanos que vienen.
Sí.
Question, are there many more Central Americans and Hondurans in particular who are crossing the border? Answer, yes.
If there's no further questions, we'll proceed to, is there any further questions?
No, they're not.
Okay, we'll proceed to our second witness, Danielle Castellano. Mr. Castellano, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Sí,
Okay. Mr. Castellano, where are you from?
yo soy de Lima, Perú.
Okay.
I'm from Lima, Peru.
When did you come to New Orleans?
Yo llegué el año pasado, en el mes de marzo, para la reconstrucción de Katrina.
I came here last year in the month of March for the reconstruction of Katrina.
And did you come on a visa?
Sí, llegué acá a Estados Unidos con la visa de programas de trabajadores huéspedes H2B.
Yes, I came here with a guest worker visa H-2B.
You could explain for those who may not be aware of H visas, what those guest visas, how do you obtain a guest worker visa, and what are the qualifications for maintaining those visas?
Sí, la visa H2B es el programa de trabajadores huéspedes que el señor Bush tanto habla, ¿no?
This H-2B program, this guest worker program, is the one that Bush speaks so much about.
Para llegar acá nosotros a Estados Unidos con este tipo de visa, nosotros pasamos por el proceso de pagarle a un reclutador en nuestro país de origen.
To be able to do this, we have to go through and have to pay a recruiter in our home countries to be able to obtain this visa.
Algunos de ellos, en mi caso yo pagué $4,500, pero algunos de ellos, como los trabajadores amigos de la India, han tenido que pagar hasta $20,000 por ese tipo de visa.
In my case, I paid $4,500 to be able to get that visa, but in India and other places, you can pay up to $20,000 to be able to get that visa.
Y bueno, el proceso en sí es pagar al reclutador y una vez te juegas como una lotería, porque nosotros, por ejemplo, nos presentamos 800 personas para solamente 80 visas que dieron.
But it's like playing the lottery, because in our case, for example, there were 800 people who showed up to be able to vie for 80 visas that were being delivered.
Yo fui uno de los favorecidos, entre comillas, pero no sabía a lo que yo estaba viniendo.
I was one of those, in quote, who was benefited, but I really did not know what the heck I was coming into.
Para pagar los $4,500 que me costó mi visa, tuve que hipotecar mi casa, por ejemplo.
I, for example, to be able to pay those $4,500, had to mortgage my house.
Pensando que acá lo iba a recuperar rápidamente con todas las promesas que los reclutadores nos decían.
Because I thought I would easily get that money back based on all the promises that those recruiters had made to us.
Pero cuando llegué acá a Nueva Orleans a trabajar a una cadena de hoteles,
But when I came here to New Orleans to work in one of these hotel chains,
me di cuenta que la realidad era totalmente distinta.
I soon realized that the reality was totally different.
Nosotros llegamos, me habían prometido una buena situación, una buena casa donde vivir, con piscina, con teléfono, televisor.
I had been promised a great house to live in with a swimming pool, telephone, television.
Sin embargo, cuando llegué me llevaron a un hotel en el Mid-City que no tenía, que estaba destruido, semi-destruido, y nosotros los teníamos que construir.
But when I came here, we were taken to a hotel dwelling in Mid-City that was semi-destroyed, and it was up to us to try to put it back together.
Nos apiñaron en pequeños cuartos de hoteles, 8 personas por cada cuarto, y nos cobraban $50 la semana por vivir ahí.
We were shacked up to 8 people per room. We were required to pay $50 a week to live there.
Y después, eso es poco, porque el patrón nos prometieron 40 horas de trabajo, sin embargo, solamente nos daban entre 20 y 25 horas a la semana, pagándonos la irrisoria suma de $6 la hora.
And that's just one thing. The other thing is that we were promised when we got here 40 hours a week of work. We got 20 to 25 at the shameful $6 an hour pay rate.
Después de eso, bueno, en ese tiempo que llegamos no había